located in the body. The approximate size of your heart is the size of your fist. Well, I like to say that it's about the size of your fist, and then if you wrap your hand around your fist, it's about that size. It's a little bit bigger than just the size of your fist. You find it in the thoracic cavity. It is superior or above the diaphragm, and it does hang a little left of the midline. And so that's why when we put our hands over our heart, we always put it on the left-hand side. The top portion, or the superior portion of the heart, is called the base, and the inferior portion, which is kind of a point, is called the apex. And you can see the apex right here in this picture. So this is anatomical position, so you can see that the heart lies just a little bit to the left of the midline. Now in chapter 1, we talked about the pericardium, or serous membranes, and one of those serous membranes was called the pericardium. And the pericardium has two different layers. The first layer is called the parietal pericardium, which is going to line the pericardial cavity. And then the second layer is called the visceral pericardium, and they also call it the epicardium. Those are synonymous, and it's going to actually line the surface of the heart, so it's going to be touching the actual heart itself. And then in between those two layers, it's separated by a fluid called serous fluid. And what that serous fluid does is it allows for your heart to work in a relatively friction-free environment. Your heart is a big muscle, and so the muscle's contracting and creating heat. And what the fluid is there to do is not allow any friction as the heart's beating, to increase the amount of heat that is being made in that general region. It also protects and anchors your heart, and it prevents the overfilling of the heart. Now, the heart wall is made up of three different parts, and the first part is called the epicardium, which we just referred to, and that's the visceral pericardium. And then the myocardium is really the bulk of the heart, and the myocardium is basically the muscular part of the heart. So the pericardium, the visceral pericardium, or the epicardium, is just a very fine lining or layer. Myocardium is the bulk, and then you have a fibrous skeleton of the heart, which is going to be connective tissue that's going to crisscross the heart itself, because the heart is an organ, so it's made up of many different tissues. So these are the cardiac muscle bundles. This is the myocardium, the bulk of it, the cardiac muscle, the part that's doing all the work. And this is kind of how it's bundled around the heart. Now, within the heart, there are basically blood vessels that bring blood back to the heart, and then there's blood vessels that take blood away from the heart. And so the ones that are returning blood to the heart are the superior and inferior vena cava. And then we also have another set of veins that are bringing blood to the heart, called the right and the left pulmonary veins. And then there are basically two different blood vessels taking blood away from the heart, and they're always going to be arteries. Veins bring blood to the heart, arteries bring blood or take blood away from the heart. So the pulmonary trunk, which is going to split into the pulmonary arteries, is one of the vessels, and then the ascending aorta, which is the largest blood vessel in the human body. So this is a picture of the heart itself, and you can see that the bulk of it is made out of cardiac muscle, and then you have your blood vessels. Whenever you see a red blood vessel, it's indicating an artery that's taking oxygenated blood. And then you're going to see blue that are going to be mostly, almost always, veins. In this case, there is an exception to the rule, just like everything else in science, so the pulmonary arteries are actually blue. But when you see a blue blood vessel, always think of a deoxygenated vein, and if you see a red blood vessel, always think of an oxygenated artery. Like I said before, there are always exceptions to that rule. Now, all mammal hearts have 4 chambers. We are mammals, so we have 4 chambers also. So we have 2 atria, which are the receiving chambers and the upper chambers. And on each atria, we have something called an auricle. And it's just kind of a flap that lies on top of that. And the blood that enters the right atria comes from the superior and inferior vena cava, and the blood that enters the left atria comes from those pulmonary veins that we spoke of earlier. Now the ventricles are the bottom 2 chambers. And so these are going to be discharging chambers where they're going to be discharging blood away. They're going to be pumping blood away from the heart. And we have something called papillary muscles that are going to be inside the ventricular walls, and we're going to kind of get to their function a little bit down the road. But the right ventricle pumps blood into the pulmonary trunk, which is going to divide into the pulmonary arteries. And the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta. Now, when we're looking at the 2 ventricles, so this is the left ventricle in anatomical position in the patient's chest, and this is the right. And look at the muscle around the wall of that ventricle. You can see that the left ventricle has much more muscle mass. And the reason behind that is that the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta, which then sends blood all the way through your body. The right ventricle sends blood into your pulmonary trunk and your pulmonary arteries, which pump blood to the lungs, and the lungs are right next to the heart. So it doesn't have to pump with a lot of oomph. It doesn't need that muscle to pump blood a very short distance.